So the empathy for your parent actually serves to give you perspective and make it a little less bad. When you are understanding where your parent came from, the context widens. And it isn't that they were evil or that you were evil and deserved it. And now you need to do, now you need to
punish them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have a story and you can understand them. You can choose to forgive them without reconciling, which is totally legitimate, but it eases, there's this sense that it's so raw, it's so swollen, it hurts so much to be in contact with this parent, and seeing them in context and knowing their story of where they came from, how they grew up, they're abused, they were immigrants, they had mental illness, they were this and that. It makes the human context so much wider for you to understand.
Right.
And it therefore eases some of the sting of how personally you take it.
Welcome to Therapist Uncensored. Building on decades of professional experience, this podcast tackles neurobiology, modern attachment, and more in an honest way that's helpful in healing humans. Your session begins now with Dr. Ann Kelley and Sue Marriott.
Hey, you guys. While we know relationships are wonderful, they are also really hard. Many of us believe that they shouldn't be, that if we have good connection and good communication, things will just go smoothly. But it's really that belief that can make us feel stubborn and even more hopeless. So relationships take work. It does for Sue and I. We can make it look easy. It's not. And one of the ways is because many of us, we differ. We differ in what activates us, what makes us feel threat, the expectation, and it's these differences that are held in our body, not our thoughts. And they influence how we talk, how we love, how we fight. So holding that belief, if he or she or they could just understand me, if they love me, they do something different, is not really true. And we're talking about relationships with your partner, your teenager, your mother-in-law. So Sue and I have created an online course that can help you understand yourself and those you love in a different way. This is not just for therapists, it's for everyone. Although the good news is if you're a therapist, you can get CEs along the way, and all of you can use the visuals and the worksheets individually, or you can even use them in your own private practice. So while the course is based on our book, Secure Relating, Holding Your Own in an Insecure World, it is definitely not a replication of the book. We talk directly to you. You learn how to understand more deeply your attachment, those you love, the neuroscience behind it, and how to build secure types of connections right now in your everyday relationships. Rather than changing one another, y'all can shift together in very important ways. It's very powerful. We're getting great reviews. Check it out. It's at therapistuncensored.com/BAS. therapistuncensored.com/BAS. The BAS stands for Beyond Attachment Styles, the Science of Growing Secure Adult Relationships. And by the way, the cost of the course is about the amount of one individual therapy session, and yet you get hours and hours and hours of what we think is extremely valuable information. So check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. I am here with Dafna Lender. We're so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
We are together at Psychotherapy Networker in Washington, D.C., having a blast and learning a lot. I don't always say that about conferences, but I am learning a hell of a lot. How about you?
Absolutely. Super high octane. People are giving their all.
They are. So you're presenting tomorrow. So I get to talk to you before the presentation.
Yeah.
Kind of work it all out. So before we jump into what you're presenting on, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then let's jump into your presentation.
Okay. Well, I'm a social worker by training.
Okay.
And I'm a systemic therapist and a family therapist for 25 years. I started working with young children and their parents in play therapy and attachment focused. And that's my jam. And then these kids grew up and I started working with adult children and their parents because the problems continue. So that's my story.
And you do coursework. You do some courses, right?
Yes, because I'm a trainer in dyadic developmental psychotherapy and theraplay. I'm also teach on various embodiment practices. I've taught with Peter Levine. I teach polyvagal informed practices, and I have a parent workshop.
All right, so let's jump in. So she is going to tell you and us about what she's presenting tomorrow, which I'm totally intrigued in. So
Yeah.
just give us your topic. And why did you decide parent-child estrangement?
Yes.
Why did you decide to teach on that today?
This is a topic that is really salient. It's an era where people are cutting off their relationships with their family members with much greater frequency. And there's a lot of suffering
Yeah.
as a result of that. When a family member cuts you off, people think that it's adult children who cut off their parents, and it goes both ways. Parents cut off their children.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that is something that you are going to feel, most people feel a devastating shame about it. If it's your child, you have spent your entire identity investing in the child's, all the times that you spent with them, waking up with them in the middle of the night, taking the doctor, going to all their ballet classes, all the things that you remember.
A lot of investment.
Thinking
you're going to have this lifelong relationship.
That's right. And that you end up, your hope is that you're close and that you have a friend in your child and that they will come for holidays and that they will share their joys with you and their sorrows and that you can lean on them and that they will bring their grandchildren when you have grandchildren.
Yeah.
And the rupture that occurs when your child decides that they cannot speak to you because of their perceived wrongs that you did to them is something that is akin to, I think it's an ambiguous grief process because the child is still alive.
Yes.
But they don't want to talk to you anymore. And the overtures you make are rejected. And so they continue to live their life and you're not able to be any part of that. In fact, a lot of adult children are pretty categorical about cutting off ties to the point where the parent is not allowed to contact them, to the point of restraining orders and things, the police and, threats and things that are very, very serious. And the keynote presentation, I think Esther Perel and Bill Doherty, they spent maybe, 50% of the time talking about family cutoffs and that it is a matter, now it's about politics. It could be about
it was a great talk, but a lot of talk about the culture of cutoff and the culture of intolerance of these differences where we're activated and disconnecting and how often that's happening in families right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And somehow that is legitimized by popular culture, whether it be social media or very reductionist therapy tools that are offered on YouTube or social media or whatever you can get for free. Now, I'm not blaming the people who are adult children who have cut off and who are sort of consuming this advice. Right. Because one of the things that's really true is that it is impossible to get a therapist. That's really key.
Okay, say more.
Well, we don't have, insurance doesn't cover therapists. Therapists have really long waiting lists. The kind of specialty that you need, it's really hard for therapists to be able to make enough money and be able to get out and do all the trainings that they need to. There's a lot of limitations on getting good therapy. So it's a lot easier.
And if you get a therapist, there's a lot of limitations about, as therapists, as speaking as a therapist, the training of how to engage that and the mixed messages. I was in with Kenneth Hardy and he was talking about this idea that if we maintain a relationship with somebody whose values feel opposite and feel so threatening to ours, there's this experience that we are giving in. We're somehow being complicit so that there's this promotional desire to cut off or somehow you're not standing in your own values.
Correct.
So speaking from a therapist perspective, it's really confusing when you're working with somebody who has either been cut off or is cutting off about how to navigate all of this because there's so much to it.
That's right. And how to validate that person so that they can feel empowered. At the same time, what is our job as a therapist to gently confront a client, to be able to tolerate some amount of, the space in between you and your estranged parent, or sometimes it's from siblings, but that is there a way for you to maintain yourself and still be in contact with that person? Not because necessarily it's of value to be in contact with your parent. It is, in my view, but not necessarily in society's view. And yet it's good for you to be in contact with your parent. and this is one of the things that I think it's important to say, your point is a person who is maybe 26 or 28 or 32 or 21 right now is going to change when you are 45 and 50. And so one of the things I advise is when your perspective towards a middle age or towards late age when your parents are older and
Or
you
dead.
see or dead, yes. And that complicates things much more when your parent dies after you've cut off from them, and then you have no way of checking back with them about the things that happen, which is a desire that comes up a lot for people who are middle age.
Yes.
To get context about what happened, even if the context is that the parent might give is flawed. We as humans want to know why, from our parents' point of view, things happened. Because we want to make meaning, but the meaning changes every day. So when you're 26, you have a completely different perspective on what happened to you when you were 16 than when you were 52, or what your parents did.
But it's so hard to believe, right? When you're in your 20s or you're in your 30s, it's very, very hard to believe that you're going to have a different perspective.
Correct.
Right? And so I imagine working with that age group, it's really hard to then say, but your future self, because it's hard to project into a future self in this way, especially when you feel so passionate, or maybe you've been so wronged.
For sure. I don't take away that the adult children have been wronged. And do you realize how unbelievably powerful our perspective as a therapist is and how limiting it is? Because if I'm 26 and I'm counseling a 26-year-old, I'm with them on that perspective.
Right.
Because
That's so true.
And being 55 has a different effect on my 26-year-old client because I have something to offer. I think that's really important.
Looking at your own activation, your own biases, when you're hearing from a client, whether you're working with the adult child who's done the cutting off, like if you were right there, you could be high-fiving them because you don't have the perspective of the 50-year-old, or maybe you're the 50-year-old and you're dismissing them and only holding the value of the relationship and as a parent, and forgetting to get in there with the pain and the hurt to be able to really work with what's happening.
Yeah.
So that's why the training that you're out here doing is so important, because there's so much complexity.
Right. And I think our keynote was perfect in talking about, I think Esther said that to be able to tolerate the complexity of the paradox of, the difference between me and my parent, and holding a boundary and still being in relationship so that so engaging is not endorsing, how hard that is, what a huge developmental challenge that is. And when you're able to do that, that's your growth. That's when you become mature. If you can accept your parent for the way they are without demanding that they change for you, then you see them as a separate person who hurt you and who violated you or whatever they did, which is oftentimes very true. And yet that you can maintain yourself and get the benefit of still being in contact with that person, because even if it's not for the sake of the family values, just for your own identity, to be able to check in with that person because it's meaningful to you. Because when they die or X, what, you won't be able to ask them, or you won't be able to say that I took care of my parent. This is a value, to be able to say, I did this for myself. I didn't take care of them when they were old and in the nursing home because I'm obligated. I did it because I know who I am and I'm interested in doing that for my own self. I know that's a really long view, but what I'm telling my 26-year-old is the following. You can cut off if you feel that that's the right thing to do for now. I'm going to help you to craft language, and we can do it together, that is not a diatribe against your parent, where you have basically burned all your bridges by name calling and giving all sorts of diagnoses and, wishing them to fuck off or whatever the, the language that people are really extreme, and just saying, this is my position for now, and these are the boundaries that I'm going to ask you to respect. And if you can't do it, then it'll prolong our disengagement, whatever you want to call it, and I will not be in contact with you. However, I'm asking the 26-year-old to hold in mind the possibility that they're going to want to open that door a crack when they're 38 or 32 or 36, even for the very simple reasons of, I had a client who cut off from her mom and then had a baby and she was still pregnant, that they found out she had a really serious genetic disease. And they needed information from the grandparents that this young woman didn't have. It turns out that she got in contact with her mom, that she made this gesture, and the mom was thrilled. And they actually reconciled after the baby was born, and the baby actually ended up dying. It was a really, really sad story.
That emotions were getting
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
And was she able to turn with her mom for support at that point?
There was a minimal amount of support. It wasn't this reuniting, but I'm not saying that. Maybe people think I'm saying, oh, keep the ties open or the lines of communication opening for this extreme case, what I just said.
Right.
I'm telling you, it's not that unusual for you to be in a place in your life where you need to ask your parent something very important from their perspective, even if their perspective is totally skewed, because at least it gives you a counterbalance to what your memory is, and you're putting the puzzle pieces together. I think all of us do that. Every day of our lives, we're putting the puzzle piece together about what happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not quite the same thing when you say, oh, no, I have like my chosen family. And, we do our Friendsgiving and we have our new, constellation. We don't know. I don't need my.
It's very easy to say, I'm not going to need that because I have my chosen family.
Yeah.
But if I'm out there and I'm thinking, but wait, being in relationship with my parents who refuse to acknowledge my partner because my partner is Black or my partner is gay or I'm gay. So what happens when you have a refusal to accept, your parents are refusing to accept who you are?
Right.
And so then it can feel like I'm staying in a relationship with somebody who is continuing to ongoingly dismiss and disregard me. What do you say for that?
First of all, that's really painful. And I will empathize with that person. And usually you don't have this perfect relationship with your parents, and then you turn, you get a partner who they don't like and they cut you off. There's a lot of problems there already and a lot of pain. And this is really, really important. It's very legitimate to say, I want you to support me or my partner and recognize them for who they are and call them they, them, and whatever it's essential especially when you're partnered with somebody and you're making your own family, that your parents support this unit and that you are able to ask for what you need and make a boundary and protect your spouse or your partner. Right. I totally support that. I think what they were talking about was the polarization today, that then, the couple will argue about whether the partner who has the parents who are rejecting should cut off ties with their family. And that becomes a couple issue.
And that often can happen where the individual feels pulled to cut off.
Yes.
By the partner.
Well, yeah, because they are.
How could you stay in relationship with people who won't accept us? And one of the things we talked about this morning, that I think you're referencing, is like this idea that agreement, like oftentimes what we're looking for instead of healthy boundaries is we're looking for agreement.
Right.
And we're looking for,
even compromise, which you cannot come to.
Yeah, like I need you, I can't be in relationship with you if you can't do A, B, and C.
Okay, so let me give you an example. A woman that I had in therapy, her partner goes by they, them, and it all blew up because the parents wouldn't call her partner they, them. Mm-hmm. But it was a much more deep-rooted situation with a lot of homophobia and things that were extremely painful and had been there all along. Okay, so the idea is, and they came to couples therapy, and there was that sort of dichotomy. How can you be with your parents when they don't
honor me?
Yeah. Actually, my client was very much on the side of saying, I also agree that I don't want to be in contact with them if they can't support us and your identity.
So there's emphasis on the answer to this is cut off.
And that's because the parents were unable to, in a full-throated way, say, we're sorry for the disrespect. We will make every effort to call them they, them. And it's because the parents were unable to give up their values of feeling like that this is not true, that there were a lot of nuances. Like, we believe that, gay rights and it's all fine, but we don't believe in trans. So they were starting to get really specific and very, very political about.
But it gets against, and that's kind of what we've been talking about through this whole sessions, right? It's like, so now it becomes a value-laden decision. It's like, okay, if you can't use they, them, then you aren't valuing me. And that's how it can feel, right? It can feel that.
It's actually, I think it's pretty true in this case that parents were erasing, dismissing, devaluing, and disrespecting their relationship. Okay, so this couple was getting married and they decided not to invite the parents to the wedding, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. And all I was suggesting was that there is a possibility of telling them. They wanted to not tell them they're getting married. Okay, so we are getting married. We're not going to invite you because we don't feel comfortable with that. It does not mean that we won't send you a Christmas card. It does not mean that we won't send you a letter letting you know if we moved. It does not mean that you can't have our email and that we're going to block our email and text. I was wondering whether there was a way in which they could maintain some ties so that when there is some change, if there is some change on either side, that it could be with this not this scorched earth, all black and white.
That makes a lot of sense.
And developmentally, these people are 29, 30. They're on their way to becoming a family and, and having kids, and they needed to distinguish themselves like that. And I think that a lot of things can happen in the subsequent 40 years of their life that they need to be able to
for their parents and for them.
Exactly.
Right.
So that even in and of itself, that was a dilemma for them, whether they could keep in contact in some way. They decided actually not to tell their parents that they were getting married, and they essentially cut off their parents on that side. Yeah. So I assume I'll see them again for couples therapy because I don't think this is going to go away. I think the woman who I started with, who's my client, my original client, is going to need to revisit this.
So I guess one of the things we could take from this is that not making decisions in this current moment that last a lifetime, realizing that our future self is going to have all sorts of different perspectives and that you can hold your own honor, hold your own position of what's important. I want to cut off right now. But do you need to send, because often the message of not now, never, the not now can be, and tell me if you feel like this is accurate. The not now could be, it feels too intolerable to be in your presence and feel dismissed and discounted. It's so painful. And so I need to draw a boundary with you because it's so painful. I'm going to cut you off forever oftentimes can be, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but a lot of times it can be a message. It can be my desire, even if it's inherently, to engage in a change of you. And so if I cut you off, then maybe I can motivate you to see what you're going to lose, to change, can be the false position. And so if we're trained to, are we holding ourselves, or in our effort to contain our emotions, are we trying to change the other person? And I think that's a really important dialogue to have, to look at, to go deeper on. And what you're recommending with a really trained therapist.
Yeah, you touched on something really important, which is this deep sense of vengeance that you will see, what you've done, and this is the price you're going to pay, and you will feel the pain that you inflicted on us. There's a lot of rage sometimes in some of these cutoffs, right? Which is very, very concerning because you never want to go from that position. You don't do anything.
Which is the point. Yeah, which is the point of what we're seeing across the country. We're talking about estrangements in all different ways.
Right.
There is a lot of estrangement, which is what we were talking about this morning. A lot of estrangement in that I cannot tolerate the opposite political view and the promotion of I have to cut you off, because if I don't, all I have to deal with, feel like I'm losing my values. I feel like I'm giving in. And so there's this promotion right now in our culture that all the emotions that we're experiencing, it promotes violent reactions. It promotes us to cut off from one another in order to send a message or distinguish. So that's a really painful experience a lot of families are having.
Right. It's promoting the sense of vengeance, of punishment, of retribution.
Yeah.
Comes from a deep, deep wound that politicians inflame by the rhetoric. And I think what Bill Doherty said is, if he spoke to people in his Better Angels group and said about that, when it's hard for me to hate you, my person on the other side of the political, debate, when I feel your heart, I see your heart. And I don't know if both the foster children who grew up to be on different sides of the politics or a different family or a different story, but the idea is that not having the capacity at all to have empathy for the other side is really, really worrisome. And I'm not, now people say, okay, you're asking me as an adult child who's choosing to cut off to have empathy for my parent who abused me, who did horrible things, who denied my identity or violated me and things like that. No, if that is incredibly painful. And I need everybody to understand, of course, of course, you need to draw a boundary. I honor that.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're my client. I love you so much. I want to protect you. I'm not
boundaries need to be drawn, right? You're not saying boundaries don't need to be drawn.
Right. So the empathy for your parent actually serves to give you perspective and make it a little less bad. When you are understanding where your parent came from, the context widens. And it isn't that they were evil or that you were evil and deserved it. And now you need to now you need to
punish them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have a story and you can understand them. You can choose to forgive them without reconciling, which is totally legitimate, but it eases, there's this sense that it's so raw, it's so swollen, it hurts so much to be in contact with this parent, and seeing them in context and knowing their story of where they came from, how they grew up, they're abused, they were immigrants, they had mental illness, they were this and that. It makes the human context so much wider for you to understand.
Right.
And it therefore eases some of the sting of how personally you take it.
Which is not the same thing as I'm going to understand them and then move quickly to forgiveness and wiping it away and forget. This is not about forgiveness and forgetting.
No.
It's about complexity and understanding so that you can see two people, or more than two people in this case, but that you can see and differentiate. And in order to differentiate, you have to see the other people, the other person, and see that their complexity.
Right.
But you can still do that and hold a boundary. It doesn't mean that if I see your perspective and I could see how you were raised and how you could come to this, that then I need to just erase the boundary and forgive. I can still hold the boundary and say, I choose not to be in contact with you. It's too painful. You keep refusing to use my pronoun. You keep refusing to accept my partner. You keep refusing to treat me with respect. So I get to set this boundary that I want to have some distance. I want to create a line. But what you're suggesting is the total cut off.
Total cut off is okay.
Oh, yes.
It is okay.
Right.
Any boundary is okay. And there's a spectrum or a continuum of the distance or estrangement from, just being emotionally distant and just keeping it functional to all the way to cut off, saying, I'm never speaking to you again.
I'm blocking. You need to do that. You need to do
That's
that.
okay.
Yes.
I want to know what's going on the inside for the person in terms of what's motivating them and understanding how they do it, how they talk to themselves in this. Like, I don't want them to cut off their parents from in their mind. I want them to be able to understand the importance of that relationship and hold the complexity. Hold the complexity
inside them.
Exactly. Exactly. And that they make an informed decision and not one that is that scorched earth sort of mentality of thinking that I'll never need them again because, I'm an individual and I have my rights and I will be, a fine, and we'll never need to reference them again.
Because scorched earth is also saying, I can't tolerate this complexity inside me so much so that I have to scorch the earth. Is totally to your point. It's because there's so much complexity inside you. And what you're saying is you really need to go in and explore that complexity inside you about this relationship. It isn't about what necessarily ends up between you. It's about what's going on. The idea of vengeance, the idea that I've got to scorch the earth in order to be able to hold myself.
That's right. And those of you who are listening are thinking, okay, I actually did what you said and I put a boundary with my parents that was maybe a little bit more, wasn't a complete cutoff. Like I'll send them a birthday card or I'll send them pictures of the grandchildren or I will let them know about graduation, things like that. And that the parents continuously violate your boundaries. I understand why. Of course I understand. Why cut off? And you say, okay, well, we're erasing our, we're changing to our PO box and we're moving. You can't send us letters, or we'll reject your texts or emails. I understand that. However, I'm not even talking about the value of being in connection with your parents for the sake of the family, the family bonds and the more traditional values, or more the communitarian values, the collective values. I'm even saying for yourself, being able to change your mind in the future and having the capacity to communicate with your parents in a respectful way and not, categorizing them as mentally ill and narcissist and calling them names and writing, vitriol is really, really helpful, just as a way of being able to keep your future self open to the possibility that you'll be in contact with them. It's a very practical level that I'm talking about
That
here.
makes sense. Yeah, because you're asking people to, it's a couple of different things. Again, you're holding your future self, which is almost impossible to do at certain stages of your life, knowing that you will be different, they will be different. And so you're staying in this place that's self-protective. It's not about them, it's about you is one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's useful, and it goes along with our individualist ethos of today. It still serves you.
It so does. And I, just as you said that, I want to push back so hard because the individual ethos of today is a really painful ethos, I think.
I know.
Because it promotes the cutoff. And again, I'm agreeing with you. There are times we need to cut people off in our lives because we've tried and we've tried and we've tried and we can't reach them. And it has to be coming from a place of, I've got to take care of myself. But there's still a relational component which doesn't have to be self-sacrificing to stay in relation. And I think one of the things you're promoting is we have to look at why we're cutting off. I think we can promote, and we are promoting cutoffs in a self-protective way that is non-relational. In other words, the relational is holding what you're suggesting, is holding that other person from a relational perspective. Because, as Kenneth Hardy would say, we all subjugated parts, and so do your parents. And so we have to see what parts of one another are in pain, and we have to explore our parts. I'm a big advocate for the individual, but there's the individual and the other, and I don't think one has to cut off the other.
And I think that is the work of psychotherapy. That's exactly what we do, is hold the complexity.
When someone close to me got out of the hospital this past spring, she had all these specialists lined up, cardiologists, endocrinologists, you name it. But literally, she had no one to coordinate her care. So we're sitting there looking at the list of follow-up appointments. And when I asked her about a PCP, she said she has kept meaning to find one, but she keeps running to these roadblocks. Either they don't take her insurance, weren't taking new patients. It was stressful because she really needed someone to coordinate her care. So we literally pulled out my phone right there in her living room and got on ZocDoc. Within 10 minutes, we found her a primary care doctor who takes her insurance, had great reviews, and could see her that same week. It was amazing. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. You have access to over 100,000 doctors, anywhere from mental health to psychiatry. So you can find a psychiatrist with openings, to dentist, urgent care, every specialty. And in fact, once we booked her PCP, I realized how much I've been putting off going to see a dermatologist. So I jumped on and did that as well. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/TU to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/TU. ZocDoc.com/TU.
I'd like to add maybe another story of another family.
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
This is a woman in her 50s who cut off her mom, 75. Okay, so this is a very mature relationship already. This woman was an artist. Her mom never supported her art, always diminished it, and always said, your husband has to support you and that you wanted to do something serious. And I hope your children don't take after you. And really mean things. Yeah. And so at some point she decided that she was going to, she literally just decided, you cannot be in my life anymore. Okay. And then the anguish, the angst, the just tremendous anxiety she felt every time there was a group chat related to family events where she knew where her mother was going to be, or and we spent months and months working on her capacity to feel that she could have some space. I'm using my hands, you can see it in the video, but to be able to have that boundary where she's able to have a bubble around her and be able to feel secure in herself, so that if she sees her mom, because there was a wedding of her sister coming up, and she was thinking of not going.
That everyone suffers.
Yes. Yeah. Her own daughter wouldn't have been able to go. There's so many implications. And you know what? You can go to a function where there's 200 people and be in the same room as that person that you cut off from and still have a bubble around you of security that you fill up yourself, so that if she does come towards you, you can maintain yourself upright. You're not going to die. You're not going to fall apart. You're not going to have...
The threat is not imminent. You can quit believing that threat is going to actually kill you, which is your body is responding.
Right.
Your heart's probably racing. Your body is communicating to you, this is life-threatening. And in fact, it's actually not life-threatening. It's just painful.
Yeah, it's painful, and you can totally tolerate it.
That's the relational part, right? Because we were thinking of the whole wedding. You're not sacrificing self. You're getting a bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and she chose to go. She went. Her daughter went. This is really, really important stuff. And I give her so much respect. She was so anxious, and she's, in her 50s working on this ability to go to this family function and meet her mom, who she doesn't want to have a relationship with, and still say, I can be here. I have space that I can take up. And if she comes to me, I'm not going to freeze. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to lash out. We had to even role play, like, what would you say to your mom? And I'll be your mom, and things like that. That's a lot of really good work. And I'm so happy for her that she went to the wedding. She was too. And it turns out her mom was so self-centered, she didn't even care about her that much in the wedding, which has its own implications.
Right. So she would have not gone and her mother went in order to protect herself. Then the self-centered part, the part that is most painful part of that relationship, is the one that dominates. That individual would have lost out of the experience of being there.
That's true, yeah.
And instead she tolerated her own sense of threat and space to be able to hold herself instead of lose herself.
Right. We focused on, she's going to go and support her sister, younger sister. She's going to dance 2 dances. She's going to eat hors d'oeuvres and say hi to 3 relatives, and then she gets to leave if she wants to. That's all.
So I love that. She just set her limit.
Yeah, but she was able to do a lot more than that. She was able to stay for a lot more.
But she was able to go with her own boundary. It wasn't, so she didn't go with this feeling of sacrificing self for the sister, or that wouldn't be good, right? She went partly for the sister, but partly for herself.
Right.
And then she set the boundaries for herself.
She set the boundaries and the expectations, but it took so much work for her to be able to create a space of safety with her. I'm an EMDR therapist. I'm a somatic therapist. So there's a lot of things about the body that you also are specializing in, of being able to feel more secure in our experience, our internal experience vis-a-vis the world. And so then after she
even what threats around you.
Yes. And then just to be very concrete about what her objectives were of success, was that she was able to dance 2 dances, et cetera, et cetera. Why I'm saying this is because it was really important that she went to the wedding. And that's what I'm saying to friends, is that these things don't go away.
Yeah.
These iterations of your contact with your cutoff family member keep cycling through.
Right.
And there may be other people who you will have similar challenges with as well.
So tomorrow you're speaking to therapists.
Yeah.
Right. So we're doing a lot of, we're thinking about the individual doing the cutoff. And of course, we primarily focused on the children cutting off parents.
Right.
And of course, we know that parents cut off children.
They
cut off children because they're not in line with their religion. They've married somebody. They offer all sorts of reasons, right? That they're gay and that doesn't align, or trying to teach them a message. Man, that is a painful direction. That's a whole nother podcast.
Sad. It's just so sad.
That cut off of a parent to a child.
Right. When there's divorce and remarriage and the new partner is driving the cutoff. And I worked with a family where the stepmom encouraged her husband, the father of this man with whom I was working, to cut off his son and his grandson. They almost begged the grandfather. In fact, it was really touching. I had a session with the grandson who wanted to be with his granddad, and the granddad said no. He said, I think he told me, because this was a very unusual, to work with 3 generations was really freaky. I mean, I got to meet with all 3 of them, and he said, no, my son is manipulating my grandson and making it about him, and I'm not buying into it. It was really it was a one-off with this grandfather, because he agreed to meet with me, but that was a very short conversation. In fact, the session ended early.
Well, and that tells you then that gentleman who had to end it early likely was feeling too much internal threat and not able to explore his own internal threat. Yeah. Because and I guess at some of the cores, if you're making a decision that's an integrated one, that is relational, and then I keep wanting to say that relational does not mean you stay in relationship. It just means it's relational, meaning that you're thinking of yourself and you're thinking of others. Then you can tolerate the session.
You can tolerate the session, and you can tolerate the inconsistencies, and you can tolerate that you have mixed agendas, and that what he couldn't tolerate was the idea, because I told him, it's okay if you think that your son is using, your grandson in order to try to get to you.
It doesn't mean your grandson is not important to you.
Exactly.
Yes.
That you're not important to him. That's exactly what I said.
And that's the relational part. And so we all have to watch for our parts, because I can relate to so much of like the activation and wanting to cut off so that I don't feel that intensity. So you're speaking to a therapist tomorrow. Could you give us just a few nuggets for therapists out there, or for those dealing with these circumstances, of what you hope that they take from what you're going to teach them about being a therapist in the situation? Because you're saying it's hard to get therapy, but it's also hard to get training as a therapist about how to deal with this.
The first thing I would say is, do not diagnose somebody that you've not met with labels. I just implore you not to do that. That would be a very important thing. I am asking that our colleagues, of course, empathize and support your client in whatever protective boundaries or limits that they need to make relationally in order to feel safe enough to be able to explore what this relationship means to them. But take the time. So don't precipitate the cutoff. You can start with telling your family member that you need space. And you can, if they don't respect your space, you can block them, their text and email. Absolutely.
Right.
But if you need to give a reason, give the most straightforward reason that you can. So please, therapists, do not advise the one who's cutting off to explain everything about what they feel, because that's not a good idea. Okay, there's too much content there that the other person can't hear. So I would ask therapists to help craft the email. And then from there, so take the space. And then I want to be able to help, if the therapists here are listening, help the person to feel more grounded in their identity and their individual self and their values. And that will help them to be able to tolerate any other person who challenges them, whether it's their parent or their child. There might be an opportunity to have some sort of coming back together, and it takes time. Okay. But
makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And how we do that, I mean, all of us have different modalities that we work. And I mentioned my somatic work and EMDR and attachment focused work. And Esther talked about in Bowen systems theory, if there are cutoffs intergenerationally, I always want to ask about that. Where did you learn that you can cut off people?
Yeah.
Usually there's patterns from my great aunt didn't talk to my uncle. And
I actually can relate to that. I learned the opposite.
Okay.
Because my mother experienced cutoffs in her family. And so her communication to us was how valuable family relationships are.
Okay.
And so it was
that okay for you?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I was so grateful for that because I see so often. So I guess for me, because she had experienced cutoffs, she experienced the pain of it. So she really helped our value of maintaining even when it's really hard. We can fight, et cetera, but you stay in. Now, of course, there's limits to that because you can stay in when it's a horrible situation and it's abusive.
Yeah.
Right. So that's not what we're advocating for.
No.
But I really love where you're going because what I think you're saying, part of it is like the like staying into not making the decision in an activated state to cut off that may have been the way you've learned or may you modeled that this is how you handle conflict, but really going in. And I think earlier you said something about whatever identity that you're fighting for, that maybe you're getting rejected by your parents for. I think what you're saying is therapists working with that person on their own identity. So they're not in a reactive place.
Absolutely.
So that like less valid, you have not felt validated with your family about your identity and you have felt rejected. So let's work on that.
Absolutely.
Then let's come to the decision of the cutoff. You may have to boundary it off now while you deal with it, but let's help you find your grounding so that you're not in the active state of dealing with that while making this lifetime decision.
Exactly. And then you have choice. When you're so more secure, you have so many more choices. You see the nuance of who's in front of you.
Right.
And you no longer have to pick and say, if you don't, if you vote for this person or if you don't call my partner, they, them, that, I'll never speak to you again. You don't have to do that anymore because it's not so polarized. You're not as threatened.
Right.
It's really a place of nuance. You can be calm about it.
And you could come from this active, secure place. For the parents out there that have been cut off that might be listening.
Yes.
Because what a painful thing to be cut off. You started the podcast, you started the discussion with, we have children, we imagine that they're going to be in our lives. And so when the cutoff happens, it is probably one of the most painful, although, you mentioned the one parent who's moved on because they're in a more self-centered way. But for many parents, that is the biggest pain they can imagine. And I imagine there are people out there that have been cut off for political reasons or for any of the reasons we've talked about or haven't talked about today.
Golly.
I
have a lot to say. I will be a little bit abbreviated, but
give some nuggets.
So much.
Yeah.
So incredibly painful. And that comes back to the ambiguous loss because your child is out there, but you don't have access to them.
Yes.
That's incredibly hard because it's really hard there's no grieving that's recognized for that. You can barely speak about it to people who ask about your children.
Right.
And it's very shameful. And this paradox of being able to say, I may or may not be able to speak to my child again or be in their lives again. They're alive. I don't know them. I may know them in the future. Is so hard. And it's kind of really against our Western values to be able to hold paradox like that. Because we're Black and white, we want to grieve and move on. And that doesn't work in this paradigm. It can be completely senseless. It feels senseless. Doesn't make sense. I had a child. Now I don't. They're still alive. They reject me. We have completely different stories of what happened. And I've done everything. The only way I know is to be able to find some meaning in addition to the senselessness somewhere. Because if we don't have meaning as humans, then we cannot go on. We're just in our bed, despairing and depressed, just to try to survive.
Yeah.
Meaning, and what is this meaning? I have to be able to find meaning in something that I do relationally, whether it's being a volunteer or working with kids or maximizing my relationship with my spouse or my other children and grandchildren. Meaning and senselessness have to go together. Because there's so many senseless things that are
right now, for sure. Yes.
And the only way, I think, to ward off that sense of absolute just devastation as a human when your mother part or your parent part is essentially, not just cut off, but mortally rejected.
So for the individual that's happened, that's one way to be able to take care of self. That's so important. And would you offer anything in a sense, you've mentioned for the kids to remember that there's a future, right? Is there anything that you would recommend to a parent who wants to hold some hope for reconnection. I think the one thing that keeps coming to my mind is if you say it's senseless, remember there's something that pained child is asking you for. And have you thought about it?
Oh, sure. I'm assuming some parents are not able. Okay. This if you've made an apology and acknowledged what the child is asking for.
Well, maybe you haven't. Maybe you just keep saying eye roll, like they're just being ridiculous, or how do they expect me to accept a gender that gender's non-binary that makes, or let's say abortion, or like some reason that there's a cutoff.
Okay.
What would you recommend
to parents
if they have been cut off? Right? What would you recommend?
I see. Okay, I would say, I empathize with you so much, and I'm going to ask you something. How important is your value that you're holding versus how important is it to have a relationship with your child? Because your child has the upper hand here, and let's talk about that. They're the ones who left. Do you understand that?
I can see myself, if I was in that position, getting activated in but now they're just trying to control me.
I know, and that's okay. That's okay. And I would hold metaphorically or physically hold the client's hand and say, I get it. I'm going to work with you on this activation. It's not useful to you.
So you're recommending, I like that you're recommending that parent go and look at their own activation, just like we're recommending to the one that's cutting off. And I guess, again, that goes the other direction, is if there's a cutoff involved, there's deep, deep pain.
Yeah.
And so that the parent themselves going and working on what is the pain that they're feeling. And then, like we were suggesting the other way, what are they missing? What are they missing about the life of the child? What are they missing so that they can go into their own reactivity rather than I'm just going to accept the cutoff, or they're being ridiculous, or they'll come, or not even thinking about it. Like realizing that relationship is very vital and that they need to explore the cutoff. They need to explore the values. Like you were saying, is that for both, is that value important enough to cut off the relationship? And are we on opposite values, or are we stuck?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times you really are, and you have to recognize that you actually are in a one down position.
True. Yeah. That is, so you have to recognize it, and some people are going to accept that, and some people, that's why are going to pound up. If you say like, okay, I'm in a one down position, rather than you're in a one down position, how does that feel to you? And how do you handle a one down?
Yes.
Because someone has to cope with the one down position.
Oh, yes.
Right?
That is going to get a lot of avoidant people. I'll say, I'll show you.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was worried about. Yeah, I'll show you one down. And so there's this way, I guess you're saying, is like really engaging with what it's like. Because my guess is if you're activated by the one down position, that's probably played out in your relationship with your child. So you looking at your activation with the one down position might be where you would start. What do you think?
I think some people are so avoidant that they would not look at this at all. In which case,
you're right.
I would go with the very, very practical and logistical. Like, what can you gain from making this apology, even if it feels awful? Will you gain the peace in your home with your wife? Will you be able to get, your other family members together? Do the inheritance go, more smoothly with your farm? Whatever the thing, I'm going to play to anything
to help stay
to show the person that I'm not taking away from your, your dignity as the father of this family or whatever. But how important compromises show strength, and you can still maintain your dignity, or however, kind of go that direction.
That's awful. All right. Thank you so much for jumping on and joining us.
It was so fun to do it for real life.
It is. To not be on a screen. It's so much fun. It's different for the audience because we're right here talking.
But I think they can feel the chemicals.
Yes, I love it. All right. Thank you. Good luck with your presentation. Somebody wants to reach out to you. How would they find you?
They would find me at www.dafnalender.com.
All right. Awesome. We'll have that in the show notes, you guys. I'm so glad you joined us. If this content felt important to you, please take a moment to send it to somebody who could really gain from that. And also, we'd love to hear from you. any other ideas, rate and review us. It helps people find us. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you around the bend.
Therapist Uncensored is Ann Kelley and Sue Marriott. This podcast is edited by Jack Anderson.